Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on finding alternative suppliers in response to new tariff realities, hosted by Icicle Technologies. We're an award-winning food and beverage manufacturing software company based in Canada. I'm Romina, Sales and Marketing at Icicle, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Thank you for joining us today. A few housekeeping notes. We are recording today's session, so you can refer to it in the future or share with those who couldn't join us live. We'll also have question and answers at the end of the session, so until then, please use Zoom's chat feature to enter your questions throughout the session or raise your hand during the Q&A session so we can go through your questions one by one. It's my pleasure to introduce Stephen Burton, founder and CEO of Icicle, here to share his insights on today's topic. Over to you, Steve.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. As Romina mentioned, my name is Stephen Burton, and I'm the CEO of Icicle Technologies. We're the developers of the Icicle ERP system, which is a software product that allows food manufacturers to manage virtually all aspects of their production processes. And the reason why I was asked to speak here today was that I was recently in Florida, and I became really concerned about the retaliatory tariffs, particularly. So, as you guys all know, Trump brought tariffs against Canada, and we responded with tariffs of our own. And my concern was, what is going to be the impact of these tariffs on our economy? So, the tariffs in the first place came up on Canada based on accusations of excessive fentanyl smuggling and illegal immigration that was coming from Canada in the first place. So because these are sort of made up accusations, there was very little we could do to mitigate the risks. Rightly so, I think Canada responded with strong retaliatory measures, including steep tariffs on a sort of broad range of U.S. origin food products, amongst other things. So these are both the ingredients that we use to make products as well as finished products. If you're a retailer, would impact you too. But then since then, our good friend Trump has given us all whiplash by changing his tariff policy literally dozens of times over the last 7 or 8 weeks. At the same time, we've been a lot more sort of steadfast in standing behind our threats and actions in terms of retaliatory tariff measures. But these do affect all of us. And one of my major concerns is that the industry itself, the food industry, has a very, very thin margins, with margins of only 3% on average. And we've already been bruised and battered by recent ingredient cost increases and interest rate hikes, which by our calculations took out about a fifth of all microprocessors and quite a few others as well. We get reports from a lot of companies that have really been struggling over the last year to 2 years. And it isn't really very surprising, since 60 to 75% of a food processing establishment's annual expenditures are spent on raw materials. So when you've only got a 3% margin, it doesn't really take much to kind of tip you over the edge, which is why I became concerned about the possible impacts, which I thought might be horrendous, of 25% retaliatory tariffs, because it's Canadians who pay those tariffs. And these are going to drive up the cost of raw materials yet again. And of course, unlike the blanket tariffs that Trump announced, ours are a little bit more targeted, but they're still super broad. So one of the ways that we need to protect ourselves from these cost increases, and the purpose of having retaliatory tariffs in the first place, is by sourcing from non-U.S. products of non-U.S. origin. So when you consider non-U.S. sources, one of the things I had is our technical team scour our databases to identify how many ingredients we had in our system, because we have a large system with lots of companies whose country of origin is outside the United States. And the number that came back was about 80,000, which I thought was a decent number, really. So what I did is I reached out to Food and Beverage Ontario, amongst other organizations, and offered to really assist any Canadian companies who might be looking to source ingredients from outside the United States. So whether you're a member of the Icicle community or not, doesn't matter. As long as you're a Canadian food manufacturer that sources ingredients from the US, you should know that this tariff situation has hit you or is about to hit you quite hard, whether through direct increases, supply delays by when you go to alternate suppliers, or you need to suddenly rethink your long-standing supplier relationships. So in this session, I wanted to walk you through how you might respond to the tariff threat in a kind of a strategic manner, and how to find US ingredients, how to qualify your suppliers and onboard them, and how to reformulate without compromising your product safety or quality. We're all about product safety, so that's a significant issue for us. And how to navigate the transition while protecting your margins and, of course, at the same time, your reputation. So a little bit on the tariff itself, the tariff shock that most of us in the food industry are experiencing now. There's certain realities on the ground. So in February, Canada responded with retaliatory tariffs on $30 billion worth of US goods. More are coming, and many of those tariffs are now hitting core inputs that we use when we make our products. So, some examples: US grown produce, dairy and its derivatives like whey, milk powders, cheeses, dry goods like flour and grains, packaged food ingredients of various types, flavorings, sweeteners, concentrates, and that doesn't even, start to mention all the finished products like peanut butter, wine, and coffee. Although only about 1% of US coffee comes from US sources in Hawaii, the rest of it is all imported anyway. Generally, we work with hundreds of different food processors and manufacturers in Canada, and many of them have told us that they're really caught off guard, that there's suppliers that they've been relying upon for many years. Many of them in the US are now significantly more expensive. And in some cases, the increases are double-digit percentages. And unfortunately, these new tariffs that aren't going to help, and they're not going to go away anytime soon, as best we can tell at this point. And that means that now is really the time that we need to adapt. And one of the ways that we can adapt is through reformulation. So first of all, before you consider reformulation, you should consider the rules behind it and the way that it needs to be. You can bring your reformulations about. The good news is that there's lots of great options out there. Whether you're looking for fruits, nuts, oils, proteins, spices, or flavors, there are lots of high quality suppliers available in Europe and South America and Southeast Asia, and most importantly, here in Canada as well. But before you do reformulate, there's two important points to really consider. First of all, the tariffs don't apply to all products. So the list is pretty long, but there's a lot of products that aren't on it. So if your motivation is strictly economic, you might be best to first check to see if your item is exempt before bothering to reformulate it. And that said, there is a significant groundswell that I see across Canada at the moment to avoid buying anything from the US at all, strictly really to punish the Americans for their predatory trade practices and the false accusations that they've been making. I do have sympathy for that position as well, although keep in mind that, that isn't broadly the perspective of most Americans. Secondly, the tariffs apply only to items that originated in the US. So if you buy a non-US product from a US supplier, even though the product is maybe coming from the United States, that is not necessarily going to be subject to tariffs. And an example for that would be if you used Ugandan coffee instead of Hawaiian coffee, for example, you won't need to reformulate because that's not coming from a product produced in the United States. With respect to the reformulation strategies themselves, there's really two major strategies that you can take. So one of them is you can find an alternative supplier to source the same ingredient that you're currently using. So an example for this might be if you're using US grown almonds or pecans, you might switch to a Chilean or an Australian supplier instead. So you're using the same ingredient, but you're getting it from a different supplier. The other thing that you might do is you might substitute ingredients for entirely different ones. So if, for example, you have a formula that includes US produced soy, you might be able to replace it with a Canadian pea protein product. That would have also the advantage of not containing any soy, which is an allergen. So sometimes there could be good opportunities there even beyond just the tariff issue by itself. Of course, the more we buy internally from other Canadian sources, kind of the better. But I'm not really a big fan of the whole buy local initiative, particularly in this environment, because those initiatives are really a double-edged sword. You encourage to buy for people to buy local. Other jurisdictions do the same. And pretty soon nobody's buying from anybody else. And what we really need is we need to work together right now, everybody outside the United States. And in fact, I just returned from a trade mission where I went to Australia and to New Zealand. And I can tell you definitely firsthand that our Australian and New Zealand friends and other Commonwealth countries as well are just as concerned about Trump's bullying tactics as we are. And they're really happy to work with us. And we should be happy to work with them as well. Because ultimately we're going to be much stronger together than if each country tries to go after tries to defend themselves against the U.S. alone. But these, of course, all have financial considerations that you have to consider. So for most items, the prospects actually can look pretty good. One of our customers reformulated a cereal product that they made recently by replacing a U.S. sourced dried fruit blend with ingredients that they happen to source from Turkey and Mexico. The resulting product had the same shelf life exactly and nearly identical taste. And the big bonus in their case is that they managed to come up with a 17% cost reduction, which was really pretty good. The biggest obstacle that I see, though, is shipping costs. So when I was in Australia recently, there's a free trade agreement with Australia, and the Canadian Trade Commissioners were talking about how Australia is really open for products, but most of the people that I was on the trade mission with were actually food processors, so they're not dealing in bits and bytes like we are. Everything is electronic. We don't have any shipping, but they have to ship, and these smaller companies can really struggle with that sometimes. So if you're a large processor and you're buying entire container ships full of products, that's probably not going to be too much of an issue for you. But if you're a smaller processor and you can't even fill a 20-foot container, then the shipping costs can really be a significant factor in a negative kind of way. So in order to mitigate that, if you are a small processor, you're not buying huge volumes, so you can't go to Chile or Uganda and buy container loads, you might consider switching to buying from domestic distributors instead. So some examples of that, for example, is like Snowcap out here in British Columbia. They sell baking supplies primarily, but they have over 5,000 products, so they have a broad range of different products. Excellent source. Another example is Gordon Food Services, also a distributor that services a wide variety of smaller companies. So that those are options for you as well. When this whole thing happened in the first place, I actually pitched a concept to the Canadian Trade Commission. And my idea was really that they should consider contracting regular container shipments between Commonwealth countries to allow cost-effective shipments really in both directions. And, when we're talking about government, I have no illusions. I'm not holding my breath for that to happen. But I think if this trade war does drag on for a significant period of time, we're definitely going to need sort of programs like that in place in order to protect ourselves. So when you're reprocessing, you also have to consider the safety considerations. We started out our life as a food safety application, so food safety is near and dear to my heart. And that's always top of mind. And there's no exception when you're reformulating. So there's a myriad of different food safety factors. You have to consider the biological, chemical, physical, and potentially radiological hazards of the new raw materials. You may have a pretty good indication if you're doing a direct ingredient substitution, but if you're going for different types of ingredients, that's going to be more of a concern for you. You also have to consider the possible risks of bioterrorism and food fraud. And in some cases, you're going to have to also undertake testing. Sometimes your allergen profiles can change, your nutritional profiles can change, and your labeling requirements could also be impacted. But with tools like our ingredient database, which I mentioned, that includes over 80,000 products associated from sourced from non-US products, and other features like being able to do mass swapping of an ingredient in all your formulation at once, having some sort of automated cost estimation functionality. With tools like that, you can really exploit your reformulation opportunities quickly and intelligently, and perhaps even improve your margin. But when you are acquiring now products from new suppliers, of course, the supplier qualification factors are very significant to you. So there's key aspects to the qualification process. It's not just about finding a new source. It's also about finding one that you can trust, that meets your food safety standards, and that meets your lead time needs and reliability, customer service, etc. And don't forget, you're going to have to acquire new documentation for those suppliers as well. For example, we had one client who needed a particular turmeric formulation. That was actually prior to this whole issue, but it was a good example because they couldn't find the formulation they were looking for from any of their usual suppliers. But they looked around and they were able to find a supplier from Miramar, which unfortunately was just devastated by an earthquake, as you guys, I'm sure you know. But this happened prior to that. But they couldn't find the supplier himself wasn't really qualified. They had no relationship. They couldn't trust them necessarily. So what they did is they imported samples and then they tested them in the lab. It took time and it took money, but it's always better to be safe than sorry because bad things can happen. Like there could be some sort of undeclared allergen in the ingredient that you're buying. And then that could trigger a recall, which could be an extinction level event for you. So it's always better to, if you can't trust the new supplier, what did Reagan say? Trust but verify. So I think that applies here as well. In terms of the best practices when you're vetting your non-US suppliers, here's what I recommend. First of all, take a shortcut. Look for GFSI recognized certifications like SQF or FSE 22000. That one's always a mouthful to say, but any of the GFSI schemes will help you because these suppliers have typically gone through some sort of reasonable oversight and vetting process already. Could be good. Be sure from your new suppliers that you request spec sheets, that you request COAs, that you get allergen declarations and letters of guarantees. You're going to need to do assessments on bioterrorism and food fraud as well. And some of the new markets might be more challenging than others. If you look at one like honey, for example, if you buy honey from New Zealand, you're going to be in generally pretty good shape. If you go and buy honey from a country in Southeast Asia, the risk is much higher. So there's different risk profiles for different suppliers depending on the country that they're from. So one of the things that you can do is start with a pilot order. Small pilot orders is going to be able to allow you to verify the product performance and the shipping timelines. And as I mentioned before, test as required. At Icicle, we've been helping customers vet and onboard new suppliers for years through our ERP system. We've also connected companies with distributors and brokers who specialize in international sourcing. We can help you reduce import risks and streamline compliance as well. But when you move down this road, you're going to have to really be risk aware as you make the transition, and you want to mitigate any sort of disruptions, and you need to maintain your quality and your safety, as I keep saying. One concern I often hear from customers is, is switching away from a U.S. supplier going to create new risk for me? The short answer is absolutely yes. It's not even just U.S. suppliers. It's any time you switch suppliers, you're always risking yourself in a number of different ways. You're risking yourself for delays, for reliability, for quality variability. If it's a more distant supplier, you might be worried about spoilage and shelf life issues. So there's always going to be risks that you're going to have to face, which is why you need to be aware of these risks as you navigate your way through the transition. So my recommendation is first start with your high tariff, high cost ingredients. Those are the ones that are going to obviously give you the biggest ROI bang for your buck. So start with those. Whatever formulation tool you're using should give you a breakdown of cost by ingredient. So it should be quite straightforward and easy for you to identify the low-hanging fruit. If the one you're using doesn't have such a feature, my recommendation would be to get one that does. The next is to identify not just one, but multiple alternative suppliers for the same item. For example, if you're currently getting a fruit puree from California and it's going to be subject to tariffs, you might now identify another one in Spain, and one in Chile. And because you've never dealt with either of them before, you're going to have to evaluate both of them. You're going to want to evaluate their product quality, their lead times, get a feel or a sense for their service levels. And then once you kind of go through your vetting process, you can lock in with the preferred supplier, the one that was the top performer, and the other you can have as a backup. If you're having trouble finding alternative suppliers, then one of the things you can do is reach out to us, and we'll do our best to help you. But I'm also going to provide some options of other ways that you can find your suppliers. And finally, monitor the quality closely during the transition. Your QA team should be doing testing on incoming ingredients. You should be tracking deviations and nonconformities. You should be keeping the documentation up to date, ideally in real time. And the idea here isn't just to switch suppliers, it's to switch in a smart kind of way and maintain and even improve the quality of your brand. And most importantly, avoid the risk of recalls. So to get to the heart of the matter, where do you find potential suppliers? So this slide gives you a number of different sources with a number of different links. You can reach out to us and we'll send you a copy, so you can you don't have to memorize them or write them down at this point. But there's a wide variety of different choices you have. Missing from this list are two logical ones that I just thought were too obvious. One is Google. So people often do search online, or Bing, or whichever search engine you're using. Difficult to find the forest from the trees sometimes through that platform, though. Another one is one of the large language models like ChatGPT. I did some testing on that before the talk here, and it's actually remarkably good, but the number of choices is quite limited. So it's not going to give you 100 different options, but it might give you 4 or 5, which sometimes could be enough. You've, of course, got Icicle. So, we're at your disposal. If you actually already have an Icicle account and you're using Icicle gainfully, you can search directly from the formulation interface. All you need to do is click the search icon to search for a new product, and then you need to change the scope as all available. Because by default it's private. So in Icicle, all your products are private, as are the raw materials private to your account. But a lot of our clients are ingredient suppliers, and they see an advantage to making their products public. So they've made many of their products public, and you can search for those, and you can find those directly from the Icicle interface. If you're not an Icicle client, don't sweat it. You can still reach out to us by email. In fact, we've set up an email specifically for this purpose. It's findsuppliers@icicletechnologies.com. And if you reach out to us, we'll still do our best to help you, irrespective of whether you're a customer or not. Another one that isn't obvious to most people, but because we also some third-party certification bodies use our system to actually do certifications, is supplier directories and online marketplaces. One of the examples of that, the best one I was able to find, is Informa's Food Ingredient Global, FI Global. It seems to be, quite a good one around. You do have to pay for contact information, though, but you can search for products for free. So the link is in the list there, and you can go there directly. The gorilla in the space is TraceGains. They have a product called Market Hub. Free account is required to search. And one of the advantages of TraceGains is they can also help you with supplier certification information, but it does cost money. How much money? I'm really not sure. They were recently acquired for $350 billion, I think. So I don't know how much they do charge, but I think it is relatively significant. But you can still use the free account just to search online. The third-party certification bodies I was mentioning is a little bit of an off-the-wall kind of solution. But the fact is they have millions of products under their supervision. And generally, most of them have publicly searchable databases. So to give you one example, Kosher, these guys have publicly searchable databases. They also share all their information amongst them. So if you search one kosher authority's website for kosher products, you can probably find the results of all the others. And just to give you a starting place, though, so you know where to start, Orthodox Union is the biggest company in that particular space. It is US based, but it does certify products globally. So they have a very broad range. I think about 60% of all the products globally are under their supervision. Here in Canada, we have Kosher Check. It's based here in BC. It's really nice, that particular search engine, because they also provide not just the product and supplier information, but also the country of origin. So it's really easy to identify which country it came from. The biggest kosher certification body in Canada is CORE, which is an acronym for the Kashrut Council of Canada. I have no idea how that ends up being CORE, but that's what they do. And they have a searchable database as well. Unfortunately, their search interface provides pretty limited information, but the advantage for them is that they do report on non-kosher products too. So they have both kosher and they have non-kosher. On the halal side of the world, their scope is a little bit more limited because halal doesn't really is mostly focused on meat and meat products, but they do have a searchable database with quite a few non-meat products in there as well. They don't provide any supplier information, so you can identify the product, but then you got to search for who the supplier is, which is slightly disadvantageous for our current exercise, but still an interesting source. Canada Organic is another one. They certify, of course, only organic products, but the organic has been growing. There's lots of organic products available. Unfortunately, their database provides supplier information by category, but no specific products. So still quite be useful if you're looking for a spice. You can look up a spice manufacturer or supplier, and you'll get the information, but you can't look up like turmeric by itself, for example. Another source you might consider is Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. So this is essentially the Ministries of Agriculture, federal. They have a trade commission service that will, be delighted to help you source international suppliers. They appreciate. I've spent a lot of time with these people. They do appreciate the fact that trade relationships are bilateral, reciprocal. So they'll happily help a Canadian company find foreign suppliers, and they can also connect their network of suppliers in various countries. So if you do want to go to Australia, find a product, you can reach out to your Canadian Trade Commissioner, who can put you in touch with their counterpart, who can really help you as well. Apparently, they also maintain a vetted supplier list by category, but I haven't been able to find it online. So you'll probably have to reach out to the Trade Commission to find that, and the link is up on the screen there. So I'm a technology company, so we need to put in a plug for technology. Whether it's Icicle you choose, or whether there's another one of the few functional systems that are out there that you're using, the benefits of automating your supplier and ingredient management processes will really come to bear fruit at this particular point in time. It's going to save you tons of time and tons of money, and there's multiple different advantages. So as I mentioned before, you've got the whole notion of automated ingredient searching on a global scope. The mass swapping out of ingredients in all your formulations in one time, depending on how many products you have, that can be huge. The ability to reuse hazard identification and hazard analysis on biological, physical, and chemical products. The automating the process of lead time. So if you're buying from a supplier across the border, your lead time might be a day, but if you're going to Argentina, it's going to now take you a month. So you need to have your production systems and your procurement systems be able to consider that when it comes time to tell you how much you should order, when you should order it, from whom you should order it. And then the final big benefit is single source synchronization. So if you do reformulate your products, you have to redo your hazard analysis because now you have new suppliers with new risks. Being able to press a single button and have all your documentation synchronized is really a huge advantage. The last big kind of concept I wanted to share with you is just the notion of preserving your relationships with your U.S. partners. I have a soft spot for Americans, I have to tell you. I lived amongst them for a long time. I don't think they're really evil. They just have a lousy government at the moment. So some of you, kind of might be wondering, like, what does this mean for your long-standing relationships with your U.S. suppliers? I just returned from 2 trips to Florida recently, and it was very interesting to see kind of the difference between the attitudes during those 2 trips. The first time I was down there was just a day or 2 after Trump was elected. People were very buoyant, very optimistic, very positive. It is a red state, Florida, of course, so that wasn't very surprising. But The second time I went down there, which was a couple of weeks ago, and we spent a considerable amount of time. We spoke to many U.S. companies, and they, I can tell you, are absolutely concerned. Pretty close to as concerned as we are. They're concerned about the impact on their businesses, the impact on the economy as well. And, that doesn't mean that there aren't a few crazy ones out there. Like I read it to one supplier from New Jersey, a spice supplier, who actually admitted to me that, he blindly supports Trump no matter what. He doesn't care about the consequences, and he's crazy. But the vast majority are more than likely willing to work with you, and they want to continue the business relationship, ideally to supply your needs. So you don't necessarily, and you shouldn't necessarily, sever your ties with them completely. In some cases, your U.S. suppliers might be willing to work with you in kind of creative ways to legally accommodate this issue with the current tariffs. So one of the things they might want to do is supply you through foreign facilities. Be careful of that strategy because, as I mentioned before, it doesn't matter where the product is purchased from. It matters where it originated. So there's a country of origin rule. Don't run afoul of that. But they might be able to act as distributors for you to purchase products from other international suppliers, or support you in other ways, like setting up a local co-packing warehouse, or perhaps entering a joint venture with you if it makes sense to do so. What's important, though, is to maintain a high degree of transparency, to let them know that you're being forced to adapt to these tariff realities against your will, and that you're not just walking away from the relationship. That sort of level of openness is going to preserve the trust, and it's going to open the door for new types of collaborations, and also preserve the relationship going forward, because this crisis will eventually pass. So my final thoughts here. Let me close with this. Trade tensions are outside of our control, but how we respond, that's entirely in our hands. So if you're a Canadian food manufacturer, now is the time to audit your US origin exposure. You explore various opportunities that you might have for reformulation, source from suppliers in lower tariff regions, and maintain your reputation for quality and for safety. Here at Icicle, we're committed to helping food businesses navigate this complex landscape, whether you're our clients or not. We've built tools and relationships to help you move quickly, strategically, and confidently. And if you need help identifying new suppliers, or adjusting formulations, or determining the risk profiles of your ingredients, just reach out. We're here to help. And thanks for joining me here today. Happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
All right, it's time for our Q&A session. You have the option to enter your questions through the chat feature below. You can also raise your hand if you'd like us to promote you and unmute you so you can ask your questions. Steve, it looks like not a lot of questions at the moment, but we did get one comment from Jill Forster. Unfortunately, her situation sourcing citrus suppliers is rather limited. Would like to avoid sourcing from Spain and Central America because it's double the price of what it was in the United States. So for them, reformulation definitely not an option, as orange juice will always have one ingredient. But any advice for somebody in Jill's situation?
Well, I mean, just right out of the top of my head, it does occur to me that the Middle East, of course, does have significant citrus production. So that's another area. As I mentioned before, like purchasing through distributors, because it's double the price. It's probably not double the price because the product is inherently twice as expensive. It's probably because of the shipping costs. So if you can aggregate the shipping through distributors, maybe it's not just you that's making, that's having that issue. Maybe it's others as well. So if you can get it together to get big enough shipments, you can mitigate the cost that way. Beyond that, please send us a note to find suppliers at icicletechnologies.com, or I'm sure in this case, Ramina is going to jot down your email. We'll search for you, and we'll see if we can find better sources for you outside. But Mexico as well, I believe, does produce citrus products. So that's another potential option. You might even be able to get, Mexican produced oranges through the United States, although I'm not 100% sure that Mexico does produce oranges. Anyway, happy to field that out of bounds or out of band.
Okay. We'll follow up with Jill directly. Steve, no other questions at this point. We are 7 minutes over time here, so I think we will wrap up the webinar for this afternoon. So thank you so much, Steve, for sharing your insights and this incredible amount of information. We'll make sure to share the list of links to all of the participants in today's webinar. And thank you everybody for joining us. It's great to see the local food industry come together through association events and educational sessions like we had here today. If you're interested in a customized demo to see more details on Icicle's features, feel free to reach out anytime. A recording of today's session will be available on demand in the coming days, and we'll email you as soon as it becomes available on our website, www.icicletechnologies.com. My name is Romina, Sales and Marketing at Icicle, and we hope to see you at our next Advanced Food Production webinar. Cheers and enjoy the rest of your day.